Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I apologize for the delay. We were late by about 10 minutes. And sometimes when you are troubleshooting things, you would overlook the obvious. In this case, the mistake was on my end. And I was trying to have Abhijit climb walls, trying to figure out what was wrong with his side. But eventually, wisdom set in and I figured out what was wrong. And now we have Abhijit. Abhijit, welcome to PGurus channel.
Har Har Mahadev. Thanks for having me on.
Today he has the Shiva Bhakta. That is fine. And actually, the topic that we are going to talk about today is a fairly hefty matter. Abhijit, the concept of Islam, you can divide it into three parts: Darul Aman, Darul Harab, and Darul Islam. The way I see it, and I want you to kind of tell me what you think. You represent, in my opinion, the younger generation. So how you see this thing. Me, today, Kashmir is the Kashmir Valley. Those four troubled districts are Darul Islam. And to me, parts of Kerala are Darul Harab going Darul Islam. But what I'm seeing is that there is amazing amount of attempts to try and create some sort of Islamophobia when none exists. And I can give you an example on this one, but before we go down to the example and the depth, I just would like you to share with our viewers what is your concept of these three names.
Look, I'm very, very clear about this, that there is only Darul Islam and Darul Harab. And either Islam is in power or it needs to get into power, which is why either a tyrant majority or a very disturbed and disturbing minority. That said, this whole narrative that we're seeing of Islamophobia, tell me when in India historically have you had Islamophobia? You've had hundreds of thousands of temples demolished. And in spite of that, the two Hindu empires that came at that point, the Vijayanagar Empire and the Maratha Empire, did you see them pass any anti-Muslim legislation? Was there anything like the jizya for non-religious believers and things like that? You didn't have that. So, imagining something right now to create this is being done specifically to create a false equivalence. Let's be clear about it. What it is propaganda. Now, are there bigots in our midst? Of course there are. Tell me one country that doesn't have bigots. Tell me one Muslim country that doesn't have Islamofascists. Tell me one European country that doesn't have a neo-Nazi party. Tell me in America, you have the white brotherhood and white supremacists and things like that. They don't end up defining. They may be salient, they may be loud, but they don't end up defining that country. And they certainly don't end up defining the mood of that country.
Yes, and see what is now playing out, and I'm seeing like a pattern emerge. It started with, I think, the JMU incidents that probably happened somewhere around after the CAA was passed. It started with that, and then it went. There was this thing about students being lathi charged inside the library, and then it transpired that these were not students at all. In fact, most of them didn't even have ID cards. They were strangers. How did they take refuge in here? So there was a plan here to disrupt the whole thing, and then it spread to the other universities, and so on and so forth. Now, if you take a big picture, let's go back a few years, Abhijit. I have had authors from Jammu write incessantly that Rohingyas have been strategically settled in specific constituencies. Now, we have to take our mind back to the 2016 elections that took place in Jammu and Kashmir, where in Jammu, the BJP did okay, but there were many constituencies in and around the city of Jammu where the margin of victory was very, very thin. So what people who have been writing for PGurus noticed was that the settlements of the Rohingyas suddenly were sprouting up. And the biggest alarm that they had was, they said, the average size of the family of a Rohingya refugee is 8 to 10 kids. For God's sake, you can't even feed yourself. Where are you going and, procreating like mad? I mean, what is the whole point here? And more importantly, how did these guys come all the way from across Bangladesh into Jammu area? Why not into the Kashmir Valley? So there's another selfishness here at play here. How do you see this? Because this is also played out in interior Kerala as well as in Hyderabad.
been government policy. Okay, the government was bending over backwards to appease Mehbooba Mufti, and as we've discussed on this program before, the PDP is basically the sort of the baby face of the Hizbul Mujahideen in that sense. And they'd kicked out all the Hindus, but they wanted these Rohingyas out there. Now, remember, it was about 40,000 Rohingyas. I've seen some of these Rohingyas. It wasn't strategic in any way. It was more of the plan was strategic to get them in to reinforce numbers. But also understand, I've spoken to those Rohingyas, and Rohingyas are basically, for want of a better word, Bangladeshi Muslims. Okay, they want to be part of Bangladesh in a sense. So what happens here is that you have the same contempt that West Pakistan used to show for East Pakistan. That is, the fair Pashtuns and Punjabis had for the dark, black Bangladeshis, is the same kind of contempt, the same kind of discrimination that these people face in Kashmir today. So this nonsense that it's an egalitarian religion is complete rubbish. You go see the Rohingyas, you go talk to them. They'll tell you that the Kashmiris treat them like dirt. They want them there to prop up numbers, but they treat them like dirt.
Well, this is something that has to be taken notice of. You see, the challenge now is this is finding its way in newer forms. Now, every time somebody brings up these kinds of issues, right, then the average answer or the normal answer is, oh, but 99% of the Muslims are peace-loving, that they don't want anything, they are law-abiding, and so on and so forth. Well, when some of these people try to do something which is seen as something that is more like centric, I'm going to come to a specific incident that was the talk by Supreme Court advocate J. Sai Deepak at JMU. At their invitation, they invited him on the 24th of April, and there was some questions going back and forth about which topic he was going to talk about. And then once the information came out, there was an uproar, and then they ended up canceling the event, which was supposed to take place on the 30th of April. Now, the point here is, this is what I would consider a breeding ground for moderates. And these are people who are educated. This is a law school of JMU. And then suddenly now you say that a few people have objected, and therefore we will not let this event to go forward. That smacks of bigotry. And I'll give you one more example, Abhijit. This is not just in India. It happened in Rutgers University in the United States of America, where Vivek Agnihotri was an invited speaker, and Rutgers, is a den of who. And they put so much of noise, they created so much of noise that they had to take this event out of the campus and put it in a restaurant. And the event went, so each side can claim victory that, oh, the event didn't happen in the campus, and the other guy said, oh, the event did go through, it happened in a restaurant. But that's not the point. Freedom of speech is for everyone. I've got another video that I'm going to air in a couple of days on PGurus where a similar thing happened in Harvard University also. But be that as it may, see, my question, Abhijit, is these moderate Muslims, they need to speak up. They need to, they have to be the one pointing out the bigotry of the extremist elements. What are your thoughts on this?
Who's going to enable them? Who's going to protect them? See,
hang on.
Let me finish. 99% of Muslims are peaceful. Let's be absolutely clear about that. The problem is the 1% that aren't are enabled and rewarded by an absolutely rotten legal system, a rotten political system that was encouraged both by the Congress and now by the BJP. What the Congress did, remember, was a lot of these Muslim families were zamindari families. Now, when they got rid of zamindari, remember, what you got rid of, there were 3 layers in the zamindari system. You had the big zamindars, then you had the subtenants, and then you had the landless tillers. What you did was, in the name of land reforms, you had tenancy reforms. You gave the land to the tenant who was the actual real zamindar who was operating it. So you got rid of the upper layer. So from about 5,000-6,000 families, I don't know the numbers, I'm just doing a general this thing, you gave it to about 500,000-600,000 other families who were the face of oppression. They were the ones that if these guys did not till the farms and so on and so forth, would go rape their daughters, kill their parents, so on and so forth, atrocities and so on and so forth. And this was done very, very specifically by the Congress because they wanted to democratize feudalism in that sense. Before it was these 5,000 odd people controlling it. Now it was 500,000 odd people controlling it, more room for maneuver. Now, what has happened in all of this is, remember the so-called liberal institutions, Jamia Millia and especially AMU, were the hotbed of the Pakistan movement in that sense. Javed Akhtar is a so-called liberal. And he is not even as liberal as Jinnah. Jinnah used to eat pork sandwiches. You know, there's that famous episode where Rati, his wife, comes in and says, when he was meeting with for the with the Muslim League, Rati comes in wearing a very, very revealing dress, and she says, "Darling, your ham sandwiches are getting warm." And he was completely embarrassed by it, of course, but he wanted Pakistan. So understand what is happening out here. Religion is a tool. There is feudalism out there. The feudalism is so dark and scary within the Sunni Muslim community. Let's be clear about this. Shias are a different conversation. We can have that in the later part of this program. Of the Sunnis, that they have been kept under feudal government by the Congress. Now, what is the BJP doing? They're basically funding Owaisi in the background, who is accumulating all these feudal elements. So if a Muslim wants to come out and, be outspoken, who is going to protect him? You tell me. Who is there to protect him? I know a lot of Muslims, friends of mine, who are outright either atheists or they're Muslim reformers. They don't want this nonsense. They dare not speak. You have encouraged, empowered, funded, and institutionalized a 1% of that Muslim population who are extremely radical, or even if they're personally secular, they use radicalization to control the community, because this is the oldest game of the crook. You use religion to mask your real motives, and then you have genuinely radical organizations like the Tablighi Jamaat. Now notice, not one terrorist has actually come out of the Tablighi Jamaat. The Tablighi Jamaat is the LKG, UKG of terrorism. Most terrorists have at some point of time been in the Tablighi Jamaat, who have then graduated on to other institutions. So, you have a very, very complex phenomenon out here. So I would love to see Muslims speak up. The problem is, if those Muslims speak up, they will be killed in a matter of no time at all. They will get no judicial support. They will get no police support. They will get no political support. The BJP won't support them. The Congress won't support them. The Shiv Sena won't support them. Who is going to support them? And look, we are scared taking on Muslims. You think within the own community, going up against your own people is the toughest thing you will ever do.
Well, the bigger picture here is the Muslims probably have their freest voice living in India. I mean, even if you take somebody like Javed Akhtar, who's bitterly opposed to some of the things, and he's the first one to jump up like a rabbit out of the box and start complaining, even he has acknowledged many times that he could not live even for a day in Pakistan, even though that's the land of Muslims. But so there is a difference. When you go from India today, you're treated like a muhajir, a refugee, and suddenly you are a second class, even though you happen to profess the same faith. Whereas in India, there is no such thing. And so look, everybody has to live, especially.
Look. There's a fundamental flaw in the argument here. Who are Javed Akhtar and Rana Ayub and Arfa Khanum Sherwani and all these people? They are urban Muslims that have left and don't understand the clutches of feudalism. They live in an idealized society that thinks that the urban Muslim in India today is the one that is is the condition of Muslims across the country. That is not the case. Most Muslims in this country are not urban. They work in blue-collar jobs. Tell me, how many blue-collar Muslims have you seen come up? Irfan Khan may be one of them. I mean,
Yes.
from a fairly humble background. And look how outspoken he was. So, there is also this urban-rural divide that we need to understand. Javed Akhtar is not a sociologist. He is not an anthropologist. Neither is Arfa Khanum Sherwani. Neither is Sabah Naqvi, and Rana Ayub is the biggest fraud around. I mean, these other three, they're not frauds. They take on a very provocative line just to provoke and things like that. But Rana Ayub is a through and through fraud. She has been invited on several occasions. She accused the RSS of raping that nun in West Bengal, and it turned out they were Bangladeshi Muslims who raped that nun. She has come up with complete fabrications in the new, she was chaperoning him in Kashmir, whatever, her mentee in the New Yorker, the nonsense that he wrote, and the Gujarat files, for which she has the tapes, she refuses to release them, and the Supreme Court has said that she's a fraud. Okay, so these people all come from an urban milieu. They are clueless about the status and condition of Muslims. If you look at the, what was the Justice Watt Commission on the status of Muslims in this country, there's absolutely no methodological logic to it. On the other hand, one thing that it does point out is that the Sunnis are in some of the most awful living conditions in India. Understand this, if they were all radicalized, 200 million Muslims to the extent that we think they are, you would already have a civil war in this country. Okay, it's a miracle that they haven't radicalized more. This is a very, very urban, educated Muslim phenomenon, which, because they see themselves as part of the greater ulema or whatever, and they feel ostracized or not, their genius not appreciated or whatever, they project their own fantasies onto the rest of India.
I think to those who are having those thoughts, the ones that Abhijit mentioned, I think there's a huge attitude adjust coming your way post-coronavirus. And I have a feeling that the 500,000 odd people who are returning back to India for good, they may not be able to get the jobs again, because this is what's going to happen. A fraction of those jobs will get reopened, and then there'll be a mad scramble like you would not believe at a lowest cost. And I'm afraid most people who are coming back to India should think long term, that I'm here, I'm a citizen of India, I'm going to try and see where I can pick up my life and start moving forward. This is just my 2 cents. But Abhijit, tell me one thing. So the piece, yeah, go ahead.
What is going to happen is you're going to see extraordinary levels of violence once this COVID thing is over, because your economy has now been completely destroyed. Modi has been wrecking the economy for the last 6-7 years now. Now it's going to go into depression, quite possibly depression, recession for sure, high likelihood of depression. And that is when your social tensions really boil up. What we've seen with the Tablighi Jamaat is, I'm seeing it every day. The social distancing of Muslims that is happening is real, and you can't blame people for it. If you've seen people across the country go around spitting on fruits, at some point of time your personal safety is going to trump your morality or your belief in a greater secular India. You're not going to put your children in harm's way to prove that you're a secular guy or something like that. Now, the social fabric has to some extent been greatly damaged. Compound that. Now, that by itself wouldn't have been enough to stoke a lot of violence, but the economic, unfortunately, collapse that we're going to see for the next at least year or so is going to really, really, really exacerbate a lot of the social tension, and you're going to see humongous amounts of social violence happening.
That's probably true. In fact, if you look at it, see the more peace-loving, the real peace-loving Muslims who are probably not in this vocal lot, they are the ones who are being pulled into this thing, because they are the ones you are probably selling vegetables, flowers, fruits, and what have you. And by creating these kinds of incidents, everybody gets tarred with the same brush. So there has to be some balance here, Abhijit. You should not punish the entire society for the fault of a few, isn't it?
I agree, but here's the point. A guy, he is now anybody is going to suspect the vegetable seller who would be totally innocent of having spat on his vegetables. Now, are you telling me we can legislate this out?
No,
Is
you
it bigotry?
cannot. No, you cannot.
But is it even bigotry?
Yes.
He's exercising caution to protect his family and his children. Is it bigotry? Can ordinary people be part of this larger scheme? Maybe 1 in 100 is spitting on their food. Uh, how do you know that 1 in 100 isn't the cart, isn't the fruit and vegetable cart in front of your house? It's unfair to expect that of the average citizen to not have fear. At the same time, we also need to remember, unfortunately, because of the actions of the Tablighi Jamaat, something very, very bad has happened. They are going to take the fall for it, whether we like it or not. And people like Rana Ayub and co, who tried to defend them. This alt news, those creeps in alt news, Zubair and his boyfriend, what's that name, Pratik Sinha, who were trying to defend all this rubbish. They've basically extrapolated this onto the entire community. They should have come out and condemned it. They did not. And now you have what you have. End of story. It's not bigotry, unfortunately. It's unfortunate, but it's not bigotry.
That's absolutely right. I agree with you. And somebody has to protect the family. They are going to be choosy about where they buy their fruits from, vegetables from, and so on and so forth. So, Abhijit, let's take a pause from our talk for a moment and start looking at some questions. Or do you want to finish now, or what do you
No.
think?
Let's do the questions.
Yes, there are a fair amount of questions. And I'll start off with Krishna Aital. He says, engineering fake news seems to be the new modus operandi of Pakistan. How do you think it can be countered?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, Krishna Aital says, engineering fake news seems to be the modus operandi of Pakistan. How do you think it can be countered?
It's not the modus operandi of Pakistan per se. News today is just generally fake across the board. You look at alt news fact checks. What I want you to do is read this. It's a very light reading. I mean, you won't associate Schopenhauer with light reading, but there's 80 ways of winning an argument. Go through that. It's, when that is what alt news does. It will pick one word. It will disprove that one word in the strictest possible interpretation of it, and then it will claim it has disproven the entire this thing. Okay. The very fact that a fake news peddler like Rana Ayub gets columns in the Washington Post. Okay. The kind of rubbish that a reporter who's parachuted into India for 3 years, who now presumes because of his whiteness to know India better than any Indian, from the New York Times, writes complete rubbish, no understanding of background or anything, should tell you a lot. Fake news today is the norm. Okay, now you can weaponize it and use it in a smart way the Russians have, or you can be incompetent buffoons the way Modi runs things and suffer from it. I don't think he actually suffers from it, because people get irate because of the fake news and vote for Modi no matter what. So, he actually benefits from it, even if the fake news goes against him. So, it's win-win for all of them. So it's not a Pakistani thing. It's very much an Indian thing.
Indian thing.
Pakistani piece of news you tell me, I can show you 100 pieces of information that came out of Indian Hindus.
I have a question from somebody called T Tong. Clearly, it's not his real name. Riot engineering seems to be the new jihad project, isn't it? He's asking you.
Riot engineering, the new jihad project. Indian politics has always been riot-based in rural areas. Engineering of riots has happened consistently for the last 70 to 72 years. What is new about it? We grew up with this idealized version, that civics book that we used to read in school. Well, in CBSE we had civics. I don't know what school board you did. Was this completely idealized notion of India that never existed. You go through the list of riots. I mean, just do it right now. Go on Google and check list of riots in India since independence on Wikipedia. You will see there have been riots every single year after year. And then you have the 10-year rule of massive riots. Riots have come down. The total number of big riots has come down. We now follow the 10-year rule. Before, it used to be every 2-3 years. Every year there used to be a massive riot. 300-400 people getting killed. So Indian politics is unfortunately riot-based.
In fact, I have memories of these riots happening in Hyderabad. They started around 78, 79, something like that. It was essentially done by one Congress CM claimant to try and discredit the current CM in the Gaddi. And it used to be always the same thing. Everybody knew it. So a few people will die on this side, a few people will die on the other side. There will be a curfew, there will be some, problems, and then normalcy will come back. And then some kind of a backroom deal will happen between the two. Either the CM gets changed or something like that happens. In fact, if you remember, the N.T. Ramarao's slogan for unseating Congress was that Congress was hurting the self-respect of Telugus, because what had happened was, in a very short period of time, they had 4 chief ministers. And they said that, these guys are just appointing them from top without understanding what is going on with the self-respect. Anyway, so these things do have a backlash. And if you think about it, Congress is pretty much decimated now in Andhra Pradesh. Next question, Karan Tilak wants to know, Lincoln chose civil war to unite. Nehru/Gandhi chose partition to divide. Good starting statement. God forbid in future, if it is civil war for better future, should it happen, can we implement common civil code like Egypt?
Look, I'm very much on Nehru and Sardar Patel's side on this, because partition gave us room to breathe. Okay, if you didn't have partition today, you would have had 200 million plus 200 million plus 160 million. You would have had a population of 560 million Muslims in India. Okay, and given the radical hellhole that Pakistan is, all those military coups would have been Pakistani military coups, that would have been Indian military coups. And, there was this very important document written by, I think it was a guy called Ivor Jennings. He wrote it in 1952. It was called Constitutional Problems in Pakistan. And the opening line in that paper, and the old British civil servants, they were nothing like our civil servants. They were actually experts. They actually had an education. They hadn't just passed an exam. He said, the basic difference between India and Pakistan wasn't that one was Hindu and one was Muslim. It's that one got the army and the other got the bureaucracy, and they'll hang around their necks like a hangman's noose. And that is exactly what happened. Had partition not happened, you would have had both the bane of a bureaucracy and the bane of an army and the bane of feudalism and all of it. Partition gave us breathing room. That was very, very, very important. America, the American experience, don't extrapolate that. America, Northern America was industrial, Southern America was agricultural. Still, Southern America was richer. And because Reconstruction basically failed, you basically had Southern America become completely regressive, poor. It was the richer one, it became poor. And it didn't really start recovering till the 2000s, 150 years later. So, not the best comparison to have. Are we heading towards civil war? Well, if the BJP continues like this to basically prop up the same feudal elements instead of bringing serious reforms to the way Muslim polity conducts itself, well, I don't think it'll get to civil war, but I think you'll see a lot of increase in violence. Will it come to civil war? No.
Saurav Suman has a question. Do we need Israel model to counter? Is it even possible? Do you think population control law is a must at this hour?
What Israel model? In what particular?
Oh, I think we had one session, remember, where we were talking about how Israel has managed to bring the PLA, not was the Palestine Liberation Army, the Palestinians, outrages, where we talked about it in very detailed thing, wherein anytime there is some sort of a killing or something like that, Israel has been quick to come out with what happened. They show video footage of what happened, who came in, that stuff.
So here's the thing: you can bring in. Not going to deal with the security aspects of it because we already discussed that. What I'll deal with is population control. Israel today is in a very, very precarious position because the entire Palestinian plan is to outbreed the Jews and then say, fine, we accept Greater Israel as one country. Now we are the absolute majority. Now give us our voting rights. And it's not too far off. It's going to happen in about 15, 20 years that the total Muslim population of Israel plus Palestine exceeds the Jewish population. A lot of Palestinians have just given up hope and said, you know what, we're going to outbreed them. You go to Palestine today, I've been both to the West Bank and to Gaza. It's like they're packed in like sardines in a can. Okay, so now here's the issue here. I want you to think very carefully about both the previous question and this one: Uniform Civil Code and
Population control.
Remember, it is the Hindu rate of growth in the more developed states is much, much lower than the Muslim rate of growth. You bring in population control. Remember, most Muslims in this country don't depend on government jobs or government handouts. So they are not going to lose anything by any penal measures that you impose. It is the UP Hindu that is compensating for the lack of fertility rate in the Kerala Hindu. Okay, you bring in the population control law. I think it's a national necessity to control population, but if you're thinking it in terms of Muslim control, forget about it. It is actually going to ricochet back on you very, very badly. Okay. Uniform Civil Code, again. Now that the damage is done, it's fine. But remember, in this country, we had many, many different ways of running your family. Amongst the Nayars in Kerala, it was the woman who was matrilinear. The woman was kind of the most powerful in the family, just like it was in the Khasi or the Garo tribe in the northeast. All of that has changed since you brought in your, this male predominating society and things like that. Your greatest strength was your diversity. The whole reason you survived where Rome got wiped out, where the Roman religion got wiped out, where the Greek religion got wiped out, where the Egyptian religion got wiped out, is because of your diversity. If they said, a rule applies to this in terms of male inheritance, you had families that had female inheritance that would compensate for it. Today, you want to homogenize and get rid of that diversity. That's not the way it works. So think about these things carefully. Don't come up with laws, badly thought out laws. And unfortunately, this government has had more than its fair share of badly thought out laws. Don't come up with badly thought out laws that are going to end up hurting Hindus more in the long run. Come up with laws for a national cause, not because you want to get back at Muslims. If you want to get back, if your framework of getting laws is to control Muslims or get back at Muslims, it isn't going to work. The best way of controlling Muslims is to give them a proper education, not the kind of shit education you give them today run by leftists that propagates a completely fictitious Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb and all of that. Because if you notice that educated Muslims, Kerala Muslims, for example, may have a higher birth fertility rate than Kerala Hindus, but they have a much, much lower fertility rate than UP Muslims. Okay, why? Because they're educated. There are certain duties and obligations to your kids and things like that. It's not just breed them and let them do what they want. You have to provide for them and so on and so forth. These are very complex social issues. These kind of laws, I'm very skeptical. I want to see proper studies of the second and third order effects, which we never do in this country.
It's a very good counterpoint that you answered, Abhijit. I think people should take step back and understand that, a country as pluralistic as India, you have to really weigh the consequences of some of these things, which seem good on paper, but when it comes to action on the ground, they have a totally opposite intent than the intended effect. Next question. Varun S wants to know, how can we counter anti-India and anti-Hindu propaganda being spread by mainstream media houses? Subscribe to PGurus. One solution.
You can't. You can't, because it's a state solution to that. And right now, the state isn't interested in it. When the Delhi riots happened, when 51 people were killed, a large number of them, possibly a majority of them, were Hindus. The government didn't even come out and provide a press briefing. Okay, and then we get all upset when the US Committee for Religion, USCRIF, whatever, goes ahead and writes a report that's nasty about us. This is something that the state has to deal with. It doesn't matter. We can scream from the rooftops. We can trend as many things. It isn't going to work till the state has a comprehensive approach to this. Okay, we can't compensate for governmental incompetence. Ask yourself where the state was when the Delhi riots happened. Okay, Modi had time to host gala dinners for Trump, but he didn't have time even after Trump left to come and brief the press on what it happened. To this day, we don't know what the government version of events on the Delhi riots is. So if people are going to keep spreading fake news, are you going to blame them for it? To this day, we don't know what Modi's official version on Godhra is. Does anybody know what the official version is? Because I know Madhu Kishwar has written a fabulous book on it, listing things out, backed up with copious amounts of evidence, including recordings and Rana. But that's still not the official statement. See, when the state comes and puts things on record with evidence and things like that, it changes the narrative. Ultimately, this is just a battle of narratives that the state doesn't seem involved in, because it suits Modi electorally to get Hindus completely riled up, because then they'll end up voting for him.
If I could add to what you just said, Abhijit, see, one of the things that all those viewers and listeners of this channel are, what you can do is these kinds of topics about the bias of the media is going to come up in dinner, conversations. It will be in coffee table, when you go to the coffee room, you have conversations there, or even in general conversations. I think what you all can do is say that look for those media which have a neutral stance, such as PGurus. We are always saying everything. I mean, we praise Modi when he does something right, and we criticize Modi when he doesn't. And the same goes for the other side too. So the point here is that when somebody asks you, where do I get reliable news? It is your duty to tell them, here are the places where we have found something that is reliable. So the next question is from Mahesh Joshi. Is a good one. Most of Europe is battling Islamic invasion in the name of refugees. Why is this happening, and who is supporting it?
Europe brought it on itself. This is what happens when you have dogma, Trump reality. The people coming in from, where are these refugees coming in from? They're coming from governance deficit states where the state did not acquire the monopoly on violence. I hope you all understand what the monopoly on violence is. It happens when industrialization happens, because industrialization is such a disruptive process that the state then assumes all power of violence. It does not allow riots to happen. It punishes rioters very, very brutally. And finally, things kind of stabilize, and the people over 100, 200, 300 years stop going on riots and things like that. You look at the number of pogroms that used to happen in Europe pre and post-industrialization, you will see that difference. The basis of it is law and order. So what happens here is all of these people came into Europe from enforcement deficit states, which means high societal violence, okay? And they landed up in Europe. And what Europe thought was, Europe had gone past this entire phase because it has industrialized over 300 years now, 400 years now, early stages at least of industrialization, that somehow just transplanting them there would be cathartic for these people, and they would start behaving like first world people. They don't. And it's amazing they never thought these things through, because you see this a lot in adoption cases. Adoptions, you hear a lot of feel-good stories about adoptions, but for a lot of adopted kids, the adjustment to the new family is extremely traumatic, both on the family and on the poor kid. Okay, now imagine if it's so tough on a kid and a loving family that adopts them. Imagine how brutal it is on a society where you take people coming from violent societies that have no control over themselves, like Afghanistan, like Syria, and so on and so forth, and transplanting them into Germany, where the social mores are different, where the gender interactions are different, where everything is different. And that too in such large numbers. Now, remember, Germany's experience with the last migration, the so-called Gastarbeit, the guest workers that came from Turkey in the 50s, was very different. These people were coming from a dirt-poor country. They were chosen based on skills. They came for work. They didn't come as refugees. They came for work. And they were quiet. They did their job. They were actually model citizens in Germany. Their kids, on the other hand, were not, because they idealized Turkey. See, for them, growing up poor as blue-collar laborers, they always saw with jealousy what German workers had, because Turks had been gotten to fill, the World War II. 3 million Germans were killed. There was a massive labor shortage in Germany. So they saw this with a whole load of suspicion, with a whole load of, an inferiority complex in the sense. So it is not the first generation of migrants in the 50s that created problems. It is their children who lacked assimilation and created problems. In this case, it was very, very different. These people didn't come there searching for jobs. These people just came there en masse, without vetting, without having any job skills, without anything. You don't even know what they are. Mostly males. Remember, the Turks who came in the 50s came with their families. These were mostly males who came, highly aggressive, dominant males. 90% of them, 80-90% of them were males, which in itself shows you there's something very, very wrong out there, because these were the most aggressive elements of society trying to leave. Okay, they were the most capable and able and aggressive enough to get out of a very aggressive situation. It requires aggression to get out of an aggressive situation. Okay, so there's a lot of nuance to the way refugees in Germany have been incorporated. France has a completely different story. Okay, you look at African refugees in France, they've been problematic for a very, very long time. And there's no way out of that. So you've had two very, very different histories, even in Europe. And with France, the reason was that, the French were very intolerant of other cultures. They were very tolerant of, say, Vietnamese culture, but they were extremely intolerant of Arab culture. If you come to France, you must speak French, you must eat pork, you must drink wine, you have to fit into being French. Okay, there was a very, very cultural definition of it. And that in itself created a lot of problems, because there was a lot of intrinsic racism. In Germany, because of the shame of World War II, that racism was all suppressed. You couldn't be racist, and it was a good thing in a way. In France, it wasn't. France was the victor of World War II. Remember that. So there was a lot of overt racism as well, not without cause. I mean, it's a cyclic thing. The Tunisians and the Moroccans and all of that who came there were problematic. They won't get jobs, and therefore they'd get into crime. And because there was an increasing case of criminality, therefore there would be increasing prejudice against them. French society was extremely, extremely racist. So you've had many, many, many different experiences of racism of immigration, refugees. This was fundamentally just plain bad thought out. Islam is one complicating factor. Okay. But it's not the actual root cause out here. The root cause is they've come from violent societies.
Thanks for that answer. Viewers, those names that are not real names, I'm not going to entertain those questions. I think the important reason for that is that we want genuine questions. And if somebody is hiding behind a pseudonym, I think we are not going to take those. I still have about 5 or 6 questions left. Abhijit, how is your time looking? Would we have time for that?
Good, I'm good.
Okay, good. So the next one, and I'll give you another background on this. What is happening now in the university campuses across the United States? I have to set it out a little bit for the viewers, guys. And there is a detailed video coming up on PGurus on this, but I'll just give you the gist of it. The student population in these campuses, you have many different types of people. One is the second generation Indian American students. They seem to keep to themselves. Then you have the people who are coming as student on student visas from the rural India, and those who are coming from the urban India. Each one has an island of its own. And now in this mix, you have these elements that are what I would call as greater South Asian elements. And suddenly what happens is people are taking aim at some of these Indian American groups, celebrating festivals. For example, there was a big furor about why Holi should not be celebrated, as if Holi, it was being made out that Holi was an upper caste festival, that it doesn't represent Dalits, and therefore it is bigoted. Now, these kinds of narratives, I don't know where people go and get them, but Abhijit, what exactly is the way through? I mean, being educated about everything, being able to develop critical thinking powers is one aspect. Is there anything else you can tell these kids who are easily impressionable?
Is there any point telling them if they're easily impressionable? See, the thing that you should always have is a bullshit meter. Whether you're a manager, whether you're looking for knowledge, you need to have a bullshit meter. And I don't know how you develop it, but you need to be able to tell what is real information and what is fake information. Unfortunately, in this case, what happens is that, let's face it, only 10% of any population is cut out for white collar jobs. 90%, genetically speaking, will always be for blue collar jobs. That is the way we have evolved genetically. So there's going to be, when your economy basically moves towards a white collar job heavy economy, you're going to have a lot of people with a lot of inferiority complexes who are going to seek out these persecution narratives to explain away the fact that they're third raters. Now, what do? Holi was the one festival. There is a lot of festivals you can call casteist. Holi was the one festival which could not be called casteist because you used to drink a lot of bhang, get intoxicated. It was a fertility festival. And it was the one day when caste did not matter. In fact, even religion didn't matter. You know that Chapatilak Sabaji, this thing, Khelo re chishtiyon holi khelo. Everybody used to get into it. In fact, it was one of the most important occasions where, non-virile husbands who couldn't give birth to kids, because everybody would basically sleep around. The women would get pregnant and no questions were asked. It was just one of those things. We should, this modern obsession that we were somehow asexual and everything was pure. What is impure about sex? We used to celebrate sex. Oh my God, we were all, what is that song in Sikandar-e-Azam? Har balak ek kishan or har ek balika ek radha, something like that. Jahan dal dal par soni ki chidiya. You know that song, right?
Right.
We were very open in our sexual mores in those days. These modern, cringing at the very mention of sex, not talking about sex, feeling somehow that we were all born of immaculate conception, that, our parents never had sex. We were born out of prayers to Shiva and Vishnu and all of that nonsense. I mean, seriously, you realize you were all products of sex. We're all byproducts of sex, right? I mean, you know this, right? So for something like this to be given a caste connotation on the one day that was invented so that you could get past these infertility problems and caste problems and all of that. Just get intoxicated. And when you're intoxicated, I mean, an intoxicated person does not see caste. I don't know if you've gotten high on bhang. I would highly recommend it. If you're looking at caste when you're high on bhang, buddy, there's something very, very, very seriously wrong with you. So, this. Get a bullshit meter. There's nothing else you can do. The problem is the right simply doesn't have a strong narrative. Okay, we've never built that ecosystem. It unfortunately it has to come from the government, whether we like it or not, because that is how ecosystems are built. It's called an ecosystem for a reason. But till India gets its, and the Indian right gets its act together, just keep a very good bullshit meter and hold your own. Akla chalo re, that's the only way to do it.
Good answer, Abhijit. Next question from Udayan Mitra. Abhijit, what can be done to maintain cordial relations with the Gulf countries? I think I just want to add one thing, but go ahead and first answer the question and then I'll add my part.
We have excellent relations with the Gulf
That's
countries.
what I was going to say. Yeah.
It has very little actually to do with Modi. It has to do with the overall circumstances around what's happened. Now, remember, what's changed? See, when the way scientific methodology works is that you have to assess what has all changed since the 70s when Saudi Arabia, UAE were all viciously, not the UAE, Saudi Arabia was viciously anti. Even in those days, Indian prime ministers used to keep going to Saudi Arabia. I know Vajpayee went there, Inder Gujral went there and all of that. It never changed their opinion about it. So what's changed? Do the Saudis suddenly love Modi? No. What has changed is in the 70s, Saudi Arabia, after the Iranian revolution in that sense, Iran didn't have much time for all these pan-Islamic causes, and it had very little time for Pakistan. So Saudi Arabia used to prop up Pakistan a lot because they were always jealous of the Iranians. Iran was the prime US ally in the region. Don't forget that, because Iran was the one that shared a border with the Soviet Union in the Caspian Sea. 1979 destroyed all of that, and it became a war between Shia and Sunni Islam. And then what happens is that what has really changed in the last 4 or 5 years is that the threat of Iran to the Saudis, especially under Barack Obama, increased so much because the Saudis quite rightly perceived that the Iranians were taking the Americans for a ride. And they started building bridges with Israel. Okay, so it was the Israel-Saudi axis. It is the Israel-Saudi rapprochement that is now refracting back onto India. Okay, why? Because they want India to stop dealing with Iran. They tried cajoling, intimidation, and propping up Pakistan. Today, they see that that simply doesn't work, and the Israelis have had a lot of influence. Remember, even our rapprochement with America in the late 1990s, a lot of it was spearheaded by Israel. There was actually articles in the Times of India and the Indian Express saying that the belief in New Delhi is that the path to Washington goes through Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, as the case may be. So remember, when things don't fit, Indira Gandhi used to keep cozying up, Vajpayee used to keep cozying up, I.K. Gujral used to keep cozying up, Rajiv Gandhi used to cozy up to the Saudis. It never changed their mind. Is Modi so persuasive that it's changed their mind? No, it's changed geopolitical circumstances. And see, we can be fairly certain that our relations will continue to be good as long as those geopolitical circumstances don't change, as long as we curtail our business and our support for Iran, as long as Iran remains the primary threat, as long as Iran keeps trying to get nuclear weapons, you can rest assured that Saudi Indian bonhomie, Gulf Indian bonhomie will continue.
Well, just remember, viewers, that India is sending a lot of medical personnel to some of the Middle Eastern countries to help them combat the COVID-19 virus. And that is something that India has always done. And these are things that don't get mentioned because it doesn't suit the narrative of the fake MSM gang. So that's why you're not seeing it. But the truth is that India always looks at everyone as human beings first. And I think I want to also, gently tell all our viewers that, what was the biggest export when all these raiders came in the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries and take away with them? It was women slaves. That was the most valuable thing. So, in other words, what I'm trying to tell you is a sizable population of what constitutes all these Middle Eastern countries probably have a Sanatani root in them. Anyway, that's a topic for a different day and different time. Nitin Singh, we've already answered your question, and I'm going to go to this is an interesting question from Sachin Sharma. Why is the Indian government not taking any legal action against the media houses and journalists who have been known to have indulged in fake news?
First, give me a definition of fake news. Secondly, tell me one country that's enacted a law on fake news. Nobody can even agree on a definition of fake news because there's reporting mistakes which happen. I mean, when stories are fast developing, you have reporting mistakes. The problem, for me, the critical element of fake news is intent. Was there an intent to misinform, or was it the heat of the moment? Okay, intent is virtually impossible to prove. Even in countries like America, it takes a lot of investigative ability to prove intent. In a country like India, with primitive policing at best, you simply can't prove intent. So again, what is the legislation you want? What is the first definition of fake news you want? Do you have the policing ability? In which case, understand if a Congress government comes to power, understand what will happen to you. Okay. It will be used against you, and make no mistake, the Congress is completely unapologetic. Unlike the inferiority complex driven dispensation we have right now that seeks the validation of those who never give it validation, the Congress doesn't give a damn. Huh? Look what they did to Arnab Goswami. You think if Arnab Goswami isn't safe from them, anybody else is safe from them? No. So careful about it. Just going after them means nothing. You have to prove intent. The ability to prove intent in India is non-existent.
Next question from Venkat Sudhindra Padmanabhan. Sir, what is the difference between Darul Harab and Darul Aman? Are Indian Muslims following rigorously any of these things? If so, how do we deal with this? And what are your suggestions?
Yeah, they don't even look. Radicalization isn't a theological process. Okay, most of these buggers who come out and riot on the streets haven't even read the Quran properly. They won't even be able to memorize it. If they go to Saudi Arabia and Qatar and whatever, they're treated like absolute dirt because they're not seen as equal Muslims. So, getting into this, just because we've caught on to all these key phrases, Darul Harab, Darul Aman and all of that, Muslims don't sit around thinking, ye Darul Harab hai, ye Darul Islam hai, kyunki ye Darul Harab hai, main jihad kar. That is not the way things work. It works at the level of Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb or Maulana Maududi, at the deeply theological level of their feudal elite. It does not work at the normal stage. So forget about all this crap for the time being.
You basically negated the title of our show, but that's okay.
No. Because remember, it's the average rioter doesn't even understand what he's rioting for. That is what I tried explaining.
That's
it's a
true.
feudal
That
thing.
is true.
He will
Yeah.
do what he will say tomorrow. If your resident mullah says painting a car yellow is close to saffron, therefore this guy painted his car yellow, it's an assault on our religion, go burn it. These guys won't even think. They'll go out and burn it. Okay? So understand why is this guy so jobless, okay, that he's willing to listen to the idiot mullah in the first place. And second, go out on the street risking bullets, risking police, risking incarceration, and go burn this car and try to kill this guy who painted his car yellow in the street. See, go into the deeper sociological reasons for why this is happening. There is no such thing as a root cause. Okay, there's no root cause of terrorism. But societal violence here has a lot of easily identifiable deeper causes. Okay. So don't look at the superficialities, go in deep. Ultimately, if the guy, if the rioter had a job, okay, and he had an independent source of income, he didn't depend on patronage and protection from this mullah, he wouldn't give a damn about what the mullah said. He would have never come out on the road, he would have never gone on a riot.
Next question is from Subramaniam Palgad Balasubramanian. How does the state address the demographic change which will eventually result in permanent change?
Um, how does it address that? Industrialization and education. The only proven ways of reducing population have been industrialization and education. If you want to do that, congratulations to you. I don't think this government has either the wherewithal or the brains to do it. Indian governments for the last 72 years certainly haven't. This government is no exception to the rule. If you're thinking of a legal solution, refer back to the question we answered it with question number 2 or question number 3 during the Q&A session, where these ideas of legal control to compensate for state failure are very, very dangerous.
Viewers, we have stopped asking or taking questions now. We are at the end of, or almost at the end of our program. Last question for you from Teja Ravi. Can you tell about Poland and Czech Republic who did not allow refugees and how EU is going to deal with their stand? Poland and
honestly, what can the EU do? They risk collapsing the entire EU project by kicking Poland and the Czech Republic out, and yet we find Poland and the Czech Republic have the lowest crime rates of all these immigrants. I have friends whose cars have been smashed by immigrants in Germany, where the judges refused to hand out sentences even for damage because the judges were scared of being perceived as racist. Okay, so there's a whole ecosystem being created out there through this intimidation and use of the word racist, which even prevents you from punishing immigrants for their crimes. And what do the immigrants have to do? They come, they go for language classes, and they've got nothing to do. They're jobless. They anyway come from violent societies where the sudden freedom in Syria, if you'd gone and broken a car, the mukhabarat would have come based on whose the car was. Either the mukhabarat would not have come, or they would have come, taken you off, tortured you horrifically, tortured your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your kids, everything, and done horrible, horrible things to you. And today, they suddenly move to this environment called Germany. They feel absolutely no restriction on them. It's literally like putting a spoiled brat who's been over-controlled their entire life, lived in fear, and removing all forms of social control on them. It's a very, very, very dangerous thing to do. Okay, so what Poland and the Czech Republic did, I think the danger is that they are giving a religious explanation when in fact it is a sociological explanation. Are certain Muslim societies a lot more violent? Of course they are. I mean, it's a no-brainer out there. But the root underlying causes here are more to do with the societies these people come from.
Thank you very much, Abhijit. That was a very interesting conversation. You touched upon topics that perhaps people have had a singular viewpoint on, and you opened their eyes to a counterpoint where there's a lot of logic and sense behind it. So I see this particular hangout as something where people who watch this will develop critical thinking skills. Don't take anything at face value. Do your own work. Do your own research, try to figure out what exactly is going on, whether you should support something or not. So it's easy to say, let's bring a population control law. But as Abhijit very correctly points out, there are other things, there are aspects to it that we need to understand first before deciding to do that. Because what if that stops even the low, small percentage of Hindus who may be having 3 kids? I mean, and you're down. So there is a lot of stuff that needs to be thought through. And more importantly, it's going to be a tough next 18 months. All of us have to deep inside ourselves to find out the meaning of life. How do I overcome this? How do I maintain my stability and move forward? And Abhijit, thank you very much. This is not like any other hangouts that we've had. There is a lot of food for thought. I think people should sit down and listen to it maybe more than once to internalize a lot of the off left field observations of Abhijit. He's not wrong. He's in fact right in many of those cases. His wealth of research that it comes through when he's answering them. You may not like his answer, but that's the whole point. The answer is something that you need to think. Why is a certain person saying this answer in a certain way? So Abhijit, I really thank you. And PGurus owes you a lot for bringing this kind of a refreshed view at looking at things, and not just take what could be the popular view and run with it. I mean, it's important to question. Thank you very much once again, and talk to you again soon.
Hi,
Namaskar.
Harman.